Checkmate. It's the word that usually ends a game. But for Natalie, a struggling waitress at the prestigious St. Clair Charity Gala, it was the word that started a war. Victoria St. Clair, a woman worth billions, thought she was just buying a cheap laugh by challenging the help to a game of wits. She thought she was mocking a girl who cleaned tables for a living. She didn't know she was sitting across from a prodigy who had absolutely nothing left to lose. What happens when a billionaire's ego meets a genius in an apron? And what was the single move that silenced a room of 300 people? You won't believe how this game ends. The crystal flutes clinked together, a chorus of fragile, expensive sounds that echoed through the grand ballroom of the Hotel Sterling in Chicago. It was the annual Winter Solstice Gala, an event where a ticket cost more than Natalie Vance made in a year. Natalie adjusted the collar of her stiff white uniform. It scratched at her neck, a constant reminder of her station. She was invisible here. A ghost in black trousers and a white shirt, carrying a silver tray loaded with champagne and caviar canapes. She moved through the crowd of tuxedo-clad men and women, dripping in diamonds, weaving through them with a practiced grace. They didn't see her. They saw the tray. They saw the drink. But they never saw her. "More bubbles, darling," a woman in emerald silk said, snapping her fingers without turning her head. "Of course, ma'am," Natalie whispered, swapping a full glass for an empty one. Her eyes, however, weren't on the guests. They were fixed on the center of the room. There, raised on a mahogany dais under the massive crystal chandelier, sat Victoria St. Clair, the heiress to the St. Clair shipping empire. She was beautiful in a predatory way, wearing a dress of crimson velvet that looked like spilled blood against the pale marble floor. She was seated at an antique chess table, holding court. This was Victoria's party trick. Every year she hired a grandmaster, usually someone past their prime, desperate for a paycheck, and played them publicly. She always won. Whether it was because she was actually brilliant, or because her opponents knew better than to humiliate their host, was a subject of quiet debate among the staff. Tonight's opponent was Julian Thorne, a man who had once ranked in the top 50 globally, but now looked more interested in the scotch next to his captured rook. Natalie paused near a pillar, clutching her empty tray. She knew she should return to the kitchen. The banquet manager, Mr. Henderson, was a tyrant who docked pay for loitering. But she couldn't look away. She watched the board. Victoria was playing white. She was aggressive, pushing her pawns forward in a reckless assault. Julian was playing black, defensive, timid. "He's throwing the game," Natalie thought, her brow furrowing slightly. "He has a mate in 4 if he sacrifices the bishop. Why isn't he seeing it?" She took a step closer, forgetting herself for a moment. In her mind, the ballroom faded. The noise of the jazz band became white noise. All she saw were the lines of force on the board, the geometric beauty of the attack. Her father, Arthur Vance, had taught her to see the world this way before the alcohol took his mind and the debt took his life. "The board doesn't lie, Elle," he used to say, moving pieces on their chipped plastic set in their cramped apartment. "People lie. Money lies. But the king falls when the king is trapped. It's the only truth." "Excuse me." A sharp voice cut through Natalie's trance. Natalie froze. She realized she had drifted too close to the dais. She was standing just a few feet from the velvet rope. Victoria St. Clair was looking directly at her. The heiress held a white queen between her manicured fingers, twirling it lazily. The room went quiet. When Victoria spoke, people listened. "You're frowning," Victoria said, her voice loud enough to carry over the music. She gestured with the chess piece. "The little waitress. You're frowning at my board." Natalie swallowed hard. I apologize, Miss St. Clair. I was just thinking." "Thinking?" Victoria laughed, a cold, tinkling sound. She turned to the crowd. "Did you hear that? The help is thinking. Dangerous habit, that." A ripple of polite, sycophantic laughter moved through the room. Julian Thorne looked down at his shoes, ashamed. "I didn't mean to intrude," Natalie said, bowing her head, preparing to retreat. "No, wait," Victoria commanded. Her eyes glittered with malice. She was bored. Beating Julian was too easy, and she craved entertainment. "You were looking at the board with such intensity. Tell me, do you even know what this game is? Or did you think we were playing checkers?" Natalie gripped the silver tray so hard her knuckles turned white. "I know the game, ma'am." "Oh, she knows the game," Victoria announced theatrically. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs. "Well then, since Julian here is proving to be such a disappointment, perhaps you'd like to critique his play. What was so wrong that it made you frown?" Mr. Henderson, the manager, appeared out of nowhere, sweating profusely. "Miss St. Clair, I am so sorry. This girl is new. I'll have her removed immediately. Natalie, get back to the—" "Quiet, Henderson," Victoria snapped, not looking at him. Her eyes remained locked on Natalie. "I asked her a question." "Well, speak up, girl. Or are you mute as well as poor?" Natalie looked up. She saw the mockery in Victoria's eyes. She saw the pity in Julian's. And something inside her, a dormant spark that she had buried along with her father, ignited. "He has a mate in 4, Natalie said quietly. The silence that followed was heavy. Victoria raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me." Natalie's voice grew steadier. "Black has a mate in 4. If he sacrifices the bishop at h3, your king is forced into the corner. Then the knight to f2 forks the king and queen. You lose your queen, or you get checkmated by the rook. He isn't playing it because he's afraid of you." The room gasped. It was audible, a collective intake of breath. "You didn't speak to Victoria St. Clair like that. You certainly didn't accuse her of winning only because of fear." Victoria's smile vanished. Her face hardened into a mask of porcelain rage. She looked at the board, then at Julian. "Is that true, Julian?" Julian looked terrified. I didn't see the line, Ms. St. Clair. It's a complex position." "Liar!" Victoria hissed. She swept her hand across the board, knocking the expensive ivory pieces onto the floor with a loud clatter. The sound was shocking. She stood up, walking slowly to the edge of the dais until she was looming over Natalie. "You think you're smart?" Victoria said softly, her voice dripping with venom. "You think because you memorized a few moves, you understand power. You serve hors d'oeuvres. I build empires." "I should get back to work," Natalie said, turning away. "Stop!" Victoria shouted. Natalie stopped. "You insulted me," Victoria declared, her voice ringing out. "In my own hotel, at my own gala. You implied I cannot win a fair game." "I implied nothing, ma'am. I just stated the notation." "Then prove it," Victoria smiled. But it wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a shark sensing blood in the water. "Sit down." "Miss St. Clair, I can't." "Sit down." Victoria pointed to the empty chair opposite her. "We are going to play, right now. Unless, of course, you're just a liar seeking attention." Mr. Henderson grabbed Natalie's arm, his nails digging in. "Do it," he hissed in her ear. "Do whatever she says, or I'll make sure you never work in this city again." Natalie looked at the empty chair. Then she looked at the scattered pieces on the floor. "I'll play," Natalie said, "but I have conditions." The audacity of the statement hung in the air like smoke. Conditions. A waitress giving conditions to Victoria St. Clair. The crowd pressed in closer. This was better than the jazz band. This was a public execution. Victoria laughed, throwing her head back. Conditions! Did you hear that? She has conditions. All right, Cinderella. Let's hear them. Natalie stepped onto the dais. She felt the heavy gaze of 300 wealthy strangers. She bent down and began picking up the chess pieces, one by one, treating them with a reverence Victoria hadn't shown. If I lose, Natalie said, placing a black rook on the board, I will leave immediately. I will let you fire me. And I will publicly apologize on this microphone, admitting I'm a fraud. Boring. Victoria yawned, sitting back down. You're already fired, darling. That's a given. I want stakes, real stakes. Victoria pulled a checkbook from her clutch. She scribbled something furiously, ripped out the page, and slammed it onto the table. $50,000, Victoria said. Natalie stared at the check. It was more money than she had seen in her entire life. It could pay off her father's lingering medical debts. It could get her out of the roach-infested studio apartment. If you win, Victoria said, you take the money. You walk out of here rich. And if I lose? Natalie asked, her heart hammering against her ribs. Victoria leaned forward, her eyes dark. If you lose, you don't just get fired. You get blacklisted. I will ensure you cannot get a job scrubbing toilets in Chicago, and you will get on your knees, right here, and kiss my shoe, in front of everyone. A murmur of discomfort went through the crowd. This was cruel, even for Victoria. Too much pressure? Victoria taunted. You can walk away now. Go back to the kitchen. Disappear. Natalie looked at the check. Then she looked at Mr. Henderson, who was looking at her with pure hatred. Then she looked at the board. Her father's voice echoed in her head. Fear is the mind killer, Elle. The pieces don't know who owns them. They only obey the mind that commands them. Natalie sat down. The chair was velvet, soft, swallowing her tired frame. I accept, Natalie said. The crowd erupted in whispers. Phones were pulled out. Video recording started. This was going to be viral within the hour. Henderson, Victoria snapped. Reset the clock. 5 minutes blitz. I don't want to be here all night. Blitz? Natalie asked. That's fast for a standard game. Scared you can't think fast enough? Victoria smirked. I'll take white. I always move first. Victoria didn't wait for a handshake. She reached out and moved her king's pawn to e4, a standard, aggressive opening. Natalie took a breath. She reached out with her rough, work-worn hand, a stark contrast to the polished ivory piece, and moved her pawn to c5. The Sicilian defense, a man in the front row whispered. Bold, Victoria sneered. Aggressive. I like it. Let's see how long you last. The first 10 moves were a blur. Victoria played fast, slamming her pieces down, trying to rattle Natalie with noise and speed. She played the Grand Prix attack, a variation designed to crush the Sicilian defense early. It was a bully's opening. It relied on intimidation. Natalie played silently. She didn't slam her pieces. She placed them. Softly. Deliberately. She was rusty. She could feel it. Her mind was a few seconds slower than it had been 3 years ago, when she was playing in local tournaments. She made a slight error on move 7, leaving her knight exposed. Victoria pounced. Mistake! She crowed, capturing the knight. See? Just a pretender. The crowd chuckled. Natalie didn't flinch. She had lost a piece, yes. But looking at the board, she realized something. By taking the knight, Victoria had overextended her bishop. She had opened a diagonal line straight to her king. Natalie looked up at Victoria. For the first time, she made eye contact. "Are you going to move?" Victoria asked, checking her diamond-encrusted watch. "Or are you praying?" Natalie didn't answer. She moved her queen to A5. Check. Victoria rolled her eyes and blocked with a pawn. Annoying. Natalie moved again. Another check. Victoria blocked again. Pointless. "Is it?" Natalie whispered. Victoria paused. She looked at the board. The annoyance on her face flickered, replaced by a millisecond of confusion. She had more pieces. She was up a knight and a pawn. But somehow, her pieces felt clogged. They were in each other's way. Natalie's pieces, meanwhile, were coordinating beautifully. It was like they were dancing. "You're just delaying the inevitable," Victoria scoffed, moving her rook. "I'm going to crush you in 10 moves." "You might," Natalie said, her voice gaining strength. "But you'll have to stop looking at me and look at the board first." "How dare you!" Victoria started, but Natalie cut her off by slamming her bishop down. It wasn't a capture. It was a quiet placement in the center of the board. A quiet move. In chess, these are often the most deadly. It didn't attack anything directly. It didn't take a piece, but it cut off the king's escape route entirely. Julian Thorne, the defeated grandmaster, stepped closer to the rope. He squinted at the board. His eyes went wide. He looked at Natalie with sudden recognition. "Wait," Julian whispered to the man next to him. "That style. The aggression disguised as defense. I've only seen that once before." Victoria didn't hear him. She was too busy laughing at Natalie's passive play. She launched her attack, pushing her pawns, hungry for the kill. She wanted to humiliate this waitress. She wanted the shoe-kissing moment. She reached for her queen, preparing to deliver what she thought was the final blow. "Check," Victoria grinned. "Nowhere to run, little mouse." Natalie looked at the position. Victoria's queen was deep in Natalie's territory. It looked terrifying, but Natalie saw the trap she had been laying since move 4. She didn't run. She took a deep breath, the smell of expensive perfume filling her nose, and picked up her own rook. "I'm not running," Natalie said. She sacrificed her rook. She placed it directly in the path of Victoria's pawn. The crowd gasped. "She blundered!" Someone shouted. "She just gave away her rook." Victoria laughed, a harsh, triumphant sound. "And that is why you serve drinks. You panic under pressure." Victoria snatched the rook off the board. Delicious. But as Victoria's hand pulled away, revealing the open file, the smile froze on her face. The rook hadn't been a blunder. It had been a blockade removal. With the rook gone, the line of sight for Natalie's bishop was perfectly clear, and it was pointing straight at the white king. Natalie picked up her remaining knight. Her hand didn't shake. "Check," Natalie said. Victoria frowned. She looked for a way to block. There was none. She had to move her king. She moved it to the corner. "Check," Natalie said again, moving her queen. Victoria's eyes darted around the board. Her face was losing its color. She was forced to move back. "Check," Natalie repeated. A pattern was emerging, a deadly, inescapable waltz. Victoria's breathing became shallow. "Stop saying that," she screeched. "I can't," Natalie said calmly, "because you're walking into a tomb." The crowd was silent now, dead silent. The clinking of glasses had stopped. The music had faded. All 300 people were holding their breath, witnessing the impossible. The waitress wasn't just playing. She was hunting. The silence in the ballroom was no longer respectful. It was suffocating. The air conditioner hummed, a low drone that sounded like a countdown. On the board, the land